I love getting around people that are further along than I am so I can find out from them how to do it. I have so many questions that only from the school of experience can they be answered. I don't want to hear from the guy who's just read a bunch of books. I want to hear from the guy who's lived, so they can talk to me about the things that the books can't tell you. They'll tell you about the smells. They'll tell you about the feelings. They'll tell you about the touch. They'll tell you about the nuances that the theorist won't understand, but the practitioner will. And for those who practice the presence of God, there's some things that they know that others don't know. When I first came to Christ, I was in a church where somehow the senior pastor took a liking to me. We had never really spoken or anything. I was just sitting there in the congregation. He said one day, he said, "Young man, would you come forward?" I came forward. I was 21 years old at the time. And so he said, "I just want you to stand next to me whenever you see me praying for people. Pour anointing oil in my hand." He had this little bottle of olive oil, which the Old Testament talks about as the anointing oil. The principal ingredient is olive oil. He said, "Just pour anointing oil in my hand. I'll pray for people." So week after week, I'm standing to his right. He was right-handed, so he'd put his hand out. I'd pour oil in his hand, and he'd pray for people and move in the gifts of the Spirit and speak incredible things over their lives. And after a while, I started saying, I said, "This man's crazy. I know he's crazy." I mean, that's what I was saying to myself. I'm sitting there. I'm saying, I know this guy's crazy. Because how could he know those things about these people unless he'd had a conversation with them before service and worked out some kind of scam? This is all a scam. This is a hoax. And so I'm there. My analytical mind's racing. I'm saying, I know this guy's crazy, and I know this is all a scam, and I've written it off. So I emotionally disconnected myself from the things I was doing to try to process what was going on. You understand what I mean? Trying to take a step away to try to analyze what was happening, and so I did that. And so I concluded that he was crazy and that this whole thing is a hoax. And then I realized that this wasn't a hoax, and he wasn't crazy. But here was the disconnect. He was in a place with God that I was not. And I made a judgment of him because I had no other reference point than my ignorance and my lack of experience with God. So I concluded no one can have that because I didn't have that and didn't know it existed. And then I made this decision. I'm going to wake up every morning at 5 a.m. and seek God because I want what he has. So week 1 I did that. Week 2 I did that. First month I did that. Second month I did that. It was around the third month, and sometimes in my being very honest with you, is sometimes I'm there in prayer, I'm falling asleep. Say, God, why am I here? I should be in bed, and I'm praying. I don't even know if it was coherent to the Lord. But I was going through this action of saying, I want to have a relationship with God that's intimate and real and vital and vibrant and has some spiritual vitality to it. And I don't want to have this sense of learned behavior out of this relationship. I want a relationship with God, and I don't want to just be a robot. And so around the third month, the gifts of the Spirit started to operate in my life. And I discovered something, that intimacy with God produces a whole degree of fruitfulness. And I saw something. It's like relationship, for example. Sometimes you never know the kind of relationship you can have with your children, or with your spouse, or with your parents, or with your siblings, until you invest a certain emotional energy into that relationship. And then one day when you open up your eyes and look and realize, hey, I'm in such a place I never knew I could ever be. Because sometimes our only reference point to intimacy is brokenness. And And we don't realize that there are other things that exist. So it's like what I read earlier in Psalm 27 when David said, one thing I seek after. Lord, in other words, Lord, I can pray all these prayers, but one thing I pray, one thing I'm asking you for is that I just want to be in your house. And I want to just gaze upon your beauty. And I want you to want me to be with you. And I want to have that kind of rapport with you that when you see it taking place, it's like a dance. It's so rhythmic and so in sync. You know when you see experts doing something, even if you don't know how to do it. You know when you see it. It's so fluid. It's not choppy. And guess what? The Lord wants us to have a kind of relationship with Him that looks like experts. So we want to practice His presence.